In February 2023, he was found alone and severely hypothermic near a frozen lake in northern Scandinavia. This is his account. I'd always believed winter was honest in a way summer could never be. Summer could trick you, hide danger beneath warm winds and soft light, but winter never lied. The cold made no promises, offered no comforts. It simply waited to see if you were strong enough to outlast it. That was part of why I came here. The lake didn't have a real name. Locals called it the Mirror, though in winter it looked nothing like glass. Just a solid sheet of blue-white ice stretching between the trees, broken here and there by black seams that ran deeper than I could guess. I'd read about it in a forgotten footnote of a guidebook, one line that claimed the mirror swallowed the unwary. A superstition, I thought, a legend born from too many dark months and too much isolation. Still, something in the idea hooked me, a place so quiet it could erase you. I drove my battered van north from the last outpost, the heater struggling to keep up as the kilometers ticked by. The road narrowed to a track, then vanished under drifts. I parked at the tree line and carried my gear the last half-kilometer on foot. The cold wasn't the worst I'd known, but it was patient. By the time I reached the lake's edge, my beard had crusted in frost, my breath billowed in pale sheets. I pitched the tent where the snow thinned near a stand of pines. The ground there was harder, packed by wind and time. From the entrance, I had an unbroken view across the lake. At sunset, the world turned violet. The shadows of the trees stretched long across the frozen surface. When I reviewed them on the camera's screen, I hesitated. A shape hovered near the far shoreline. Small, dark, almost indistinct. My eyes strained to define it, maybe a rock or a drift of snow. But in the next frame, it was gone. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of light. That night, the temperature plummeted. The tent walls stiffened, the seams cracking as I shifted in my sleeping bag. I slept in fits, waking each hour to listen. Nothing, only the creak of settling ice. Just before dawn, I dreamed of the lake, its surface flawless, no cracks or snow. Only a perfect mirror. When I stepped onto it, my reflection looked up, smiling. When I opened my eyes, the tent felt smaller. The darkness pressed against the nylon in slow pulses. I unzipped the door and stepped into morning. A hard frost glazed everything. Tripod, boots, even the cords securing the tent. My breath sounded too loud. The lake lay flat and endless. But on the far side, near the same stretch of shoreline, I thought I saw movement. A slow shape that vanished as soon as I focused on it. I crouched to adjust the tripod, heart ticking faster than I liked. By mid-morning, the sun crept above the tree line, a weak, bitter light that gave no warmth. I unpacked the drone and flew it low across the lake. The camera beamed back crisp footage, ice fissures, wind-blown ridges, the dark streaks I'd noticed the day before. One seam in particular caught my eye. It curved in an arc near the center of the lake, too regular to be natural, almost like something pressed up from below. I circled it 3 times before the drone battery waned. When I brought it back, the feed stuttered, frozen frames of the ice from overhead. In the last image, I thought I saw the outline of footprints crossing the lake toward where I stood. But when I looked up, the ice was bare. I shut down the drone and tried to laugh. The sound came out thin. I told myself I was tired, that the cold blurred perception. But a small voice behind my thoughts whispered another explanation. The mirror never lied, and maybe it never forgot. The second day began colder.
I woke to frost rimming the inside of the tent, each breath sending up tiny flurries that settled on my sleeping bag. My fingers felt thick, clumsy as I forced them into gloves. Every movement took more effort, as if the cold had seeped into the bones of everything I carried. Outside, the lake lay still. No wind disturbed the powdery snow along the edges. The drone's tracks had already vanished, scoured smooth overnight. I scanned the horizon for any trace of motion. An animal, a shift of trees, even the dark shape I'd seen the evening before. Nothing. I forced myself to eat, though each bite stuck in my throat. Afterward, I set up the camera again, angling it low across the lake. The plan was to film a time-lapse of dawn creeping over the lake. A simple project, one I'd done 100 times in 100 other cold places. But this time, I couldn't shake the sense that the lens was not only capturing, but being watched in return. I busied myself checking battery packs, rotating them inside my jacket to keep them warm. When I looked up again, my breath caught. In the fresh snow near the shoreline, a line of depressions curved away toward the trees. Footprints, smaller than mine, spaced with an almost mechanical precision, each one perfectly formed, as if pressed into the crust moments before. I crouched beside them.
My gloved hand hovered above the nearest print, too hesitant to touch. The shape was strange, longer in the arch, the toes splayed wider than any boot. I rose quickly, scanning the tree line. The pines stood motionless. No wind, no sound. Slowly, I backed away. The prints continued in an unbroken line until they vanished beneath the drift. No sign of return tracks. I told myself an animal had left them, some local predator I didn't recognize. But I knew it was alive the moment I thought it. I spent the rest of the morning photographing the ice from different angles, keeping the tent in sight. Each time I turned back, it looked smaller, more fragile. By afternoon, the temperature climbed a few degrees. I took the opportunity to hike the northern shore, hoping exercise would banish the cold burrowed in my chest. The snow was thinner here, windswept to reveal scalloped ridges of ancient ice. Halfway around the perimeter, I found something I hadn't expected. A cairn, 5 stones stacked with deliberate care, each one etched with thin marks I couldn't read. The arrangement looked old, but the snow around its base was disturbed, as if someone had been there recently. I crouched to photograph it. When I lifted the camera, I caught a flicker of movement at the edge of my frame, a brief blur crossing the lake behind me. I spun, heart leaping. Nothing, just the same unbroken white. My pulse hammered in my ears. I lowered the camera and stood there, breathing hard. For the first time, I considered packing up and leaving that night, abandoning the project, the drone footage, the time-lapse I'd planned, but I didn't. I don't know if it was stubbornness or curiosity that anchored me there. As dusk fell, I returned to camp. The sun dipped behind the trees, drawing long shadows across the ice. I set a small fire in the stove and boiled water for tea, hands trembling as I poured. When darkness settled fully, I tried the radio. Static. I adjusted the antenna, cycling frequencies until my fingers went numb. Nothing. I set the mic down and stared at the black beyond the tent door. My reflection hovered in the plastic window, hollow-eyed, pale. Something about it felt wrong. Not just tired, altered. I lay down without eating. Sleep hovered out of reach, a shape behind the canvas I couldn't quite see. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined the line of footprints pressing closer in the dark. Sometime before dawn, I woke to a sound. A slow, rhythmic tapping. I held my breath, listening. Tap. Not on the tent. Beneath it, as if something moved under the ice itself.
I pressed a hand to the floor, feeling nothing but the cold seeping into my palm, but the tapping continued. I didn't sleep again. When dawn finally came, the tapping had stopped. I lay motionless a long time, listening for any hint of movement. The silence felt thicker somehow, like a held breath waiting for me to break it. Eventually, I forced myself up. My limbs ached from lying tense so many hours. The air in the tent was bitter and metallic like old coins. I unzipped the door and stepped into morning. A new crust of snow had settled over the lake. My first instinct was relief. No footprints, no marks, just a clean white sheet. But as I turned back to the tent, my stomach dropped. The tripod was gone. I stood frozen, squinting to be sure I wasn't mistaken. The patch of packed snow where it had stood remained, a shallow hollow and 3 indentations from the legs, but the tripod itself had vanished. My breath misted in quick, uneven bursts. I scanned the tree line, half expecting to see someone retreating with it slung over their shoulder. Nothing. I circled the area twice, kicking through drifts, searching for any sign it had toppled or been buried. Each time, I ended up back where I started, heart thudding. I told myself the wind must have taken it, that a gust had toppled it into the snow while I slept. But there was no sign of drag marks, no scrape where the metal had slid across ice, just the impression of where it had been. I packed the rest of my gear slowly, hands numb inside my gloves. With each item stowed, a tightness in my chest eased a fraction. I still had my camera, the drone, the samples. The tripod could be replaced. I repeated that to myself like a mantra. By midday, the sun had climbed high enough to burn away the morning frost. Thin steam lifted from the lake's surface. It looked almost inviting in the cold light, just another frozen basin in a country full of them. But I couldn't shake the sense that something waited underneath. I set the drone in the snow and powered it up, determined to salvage some purpose from the day. The blades whined into a rising hum as it lifted. Through the screen, the lake sprawled wide and blue-white, a plain of interrupted quiet. I guided the drone toward the far shore, panning the camera in slow sweeps. Halfway across, the feed flickered. Static crawled over the image. When it cleared, the drone hovered over a new set of tracks crossing the ice. I zoomed in. Footprints, perfectly spaced, angling toward the center of the lake. Longer than mine, toes splayed, exactly like the ones I'd seen the day before. Except this time there were 2 lines, one set leading out, another returning. I glanced up from the controller. The lake surface lay undisturbed to the naked eye. No sign of any passage, no hint of motion. But the screen showed the prints clearly, each depression crisp in the afternoon glare. A shiver crawled through me. I pulled the drone back toward shore. As it neared, the video stuttered again. For an instant, the image split in 2, a mirrored reflection of itself, and in that fracture, a shape moved beneath the ice. Long, pale, uncoiling with impossible slowness. Then the feed cut to static. I lowered the controller, heart hammering so hard I thought I might be sick. When I looked again, the drone hovered obediently, rotors steady. The camera feed returned, normal. No movement, no tracks. I landed it and shut everything off. My hands shook as I packed it away. I forced myself to walk the shoreline one more time. The cairn still stood in the same place, though a drift had begun to swallow its base. I circled wide around it, unwilling to get close again. When I returned to camp, dusk had already begun to creep between the trees. I tried the radio. Static. I climbed onto the van's hood, holding the antenna as high as I could. Nothing. The sun dipped. Shadows bled across the ice. I couldn't bring myself to sleep inside the tent. Instead, I sat on the folded step outside, camera in my lap, watching the lake. Long after night fell, the same 3 lights appeared along the far shore, pale, unwavering, spaced in a line. My breath caught. They pulsed once, slowly, in unison. I didn't look away. I told myself if I kept watching, I could prove they weren't real, some trick of fatigue, a reflection of stars. But they remained, steady as ever. I don't remember when I finally closed my eyes, only that when I opened them again, the lights were gone, and the tent door behind me hung open, flapping gently in the wind. At dawn, the tent still stood open. I'd half expected to wake and find it gone entirely, pulled down the shoreline or buried in snow. Instead, the fabric stirred in the thin wind, the flap rising and falling in slow breaths. I crouched to inspect the threshold. No tracks, no scuffs in the frost, but I couldn't shake the sense that something had passed through while I slept. The cold felt deeper that morning, less like weather and more like intention, a deliberate chill that settled behind the ribs. I packed the essentials into my satchel, the last protein bars, the field recorder, the camera. My hand hovered over the drone case.
Part of me wanted to leave it behind, an offering, as though abandoning it might be enough to satisfy whatever waited beneath the ice. But in the end, I took it. I didn't bother to close the tent. I stepped onto the lake. The first step felt enormous, as though some hidden current might open under my boot and swallow me whole. But the ice held, smooth and glassy where the snow had scoured it away. I moved slowly, placing each foot with care. The cold bit up through the soles of my boots, settling into my bones. Halfway to the center, I paused. The wind dropped to a perfect stillness. My breath rose in ragged plumes. Ahead, the ice darkened, an oval of deeper blue rimmed by pale frost. A seam. I crouched beside it. Beneath the surface, trapped air bubbles trailed in looping spirals, their shapes so regular they looked drawn by hand. I raised the camera, but my hands trembled too hard to hold focus. I set it down and pressed my gloved palm flat against the ice. The cold burned. In that contact, a memory rose, unbidden, unwanted. A flash of the drone feed splitting in two, the long shape unfurling in darkness. I swallowed, breath shallow. The seam extended deeper than I could see. When I leaned closer, the surface fogged under my breath, and for an instant I thought I saw an eye opening in the dark. I jerked back so fast I fell onto one knee, heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing moved. Only my own distorted reflection looked up, pale and hollow-eyed. I forced myself upright, legs unsteady. When I turned to scan the shore, a new set of tracks marred the pristine snow. Not leading away, leading toward me. Single file, spaced in that same precise rhythm. They stopped 5 meters from where I stood. My throat closed. I tried to speak, anything to break the silence, but no sound emerged. I backed away step by step, boots sliding across the ice. The prints didn't follow. At the shore, I turned and ran, breath ragged in my throat. The tent loomed small and inadequate among the trees. Inside, I sank onto the folded cot. My gloves left smears of frost on the fabric. I tried the radio. Static.
I powered the drone on again, desperate to see the lake from above, to prove there was nothing there. As it rose, the live feed flickered across the controller screen. First, a clean image, the ice, my own tiny shape on the shore. Then, a frame of something else. A figure, tall, thin, paler than snow, standing motionless at the center of the lake. The image froze. I stared, breath shallow. Then the screen cleared. The lake lay empty again. I landed the drone and shut it off. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped it. I sat there as the day died, unable to move. Long after the sun vanished, I heard it again. The tapping. Not beneath the tent this time. From the frozen shore, slow and deliberate, moving closer. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the cot with the drone controller in my lap, watching the tent flap shiver in the cold wind. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the same image burned behind my lids. The figure on the ice, too tall, too thin, waiting without moving. The tapping returned at intervals. Sometimes it circled the tent, sometimes it paused near the van. Once it stopped directly outside the door. I waited for the zipper to slide open, for a shape to duck inside, but it never did. At dawn, the tapping ceased. I counted to 100 before unzipping the door. The snow beyond lay undisturbed, no footprints, no sign that anything had ever stood there. I stepped outside, breath clouding the air. The wind had calmed, leaving the trees unnaturally still. Even the cold felt different, thicker, as if the air itself resisted movement. I turned to face the lake. The ice stretched pale and unbroken, but I knew it was a lie. I knew something waited beneath. I strapped on my satchel and walked down the shallow slope to the shore. My boots sank into the drift, each step harder than the last. At the edge, I hesitated. Then I stepped onto the ice. The cold rushed up my legs, erasing feeling in seconds. I kept walking, breath quick and shallow. With each step, the quiet deepened, pressing against my ears until I could hear nothing but the slow pulse of my heart. Halfway across, I stopped. There, at the center of the lake, the ice had thinned to near transparency. Beneath it, the darkness pooled oily and depthless. I crouched, palms pressed to the slick surface. It was colder here, as if the warmth bled from me faster. My reflection wavered. A voice rose behind my thoughts, soft and patient. You already belong here. I squeezed my eyes shut. My breath came in ragged pulls. When I opened them, something moved below the ice. Pale, long, slowly coiling against the dark. My throat closed. I wanted to stand, to run, but my body refused. Instead, I watched as the shape resolved a curve of what might have been of spine, a suggestion of limbs folded close. And I opened. For an instant, it regarded me without curiosity, just recognition. I don't remember rising, only that one moment I was crouched, the next I was staggering backward, boots skidding across the slick.
The ice cracked under my weight. A hairline fracture spidered out from my heel, racing across the surface. I froze, breath locked in my chest. The fracture deepened with a sound like a sigh. Carefully, I shifted my weight forward, inch by inch. The crack widened, but did not break through. I took a step, then another. The ice groaned, but held. When I reached the thicker shelf near shore, I turned to look back. The fracture had grown, a web of white lines fanning out from where I'd knelt.
The darkness beneath churned just once, then the surface stilled. I backed the rest of the way to solid ground, my legs trembling so hard I nearly fell. At the tree line I stopped. The wind rose, stirring drifts into small ghosts. In the pale dawn, 3 lights bloomed across the ice, arranged in a perfect line. They pulsed once, in unison. I didn't wait to see them again. I turned and ran, through the snow, past the tent and the van, into the trees. My breath came ragged, my vision tunneling to a single point ahead. Branches tore at my coat, clawed my face. I didn't stop. Only when the trees thinned and the road appeared, a pale track etched by old tires, did I fall to my knees, gasping. Behind me, the lake waited, silent, watching. I don't remember how long I knelt there, my breath frosting the air in thin, shallow bursts. The road stretched pale and silent ahead of me, a lifeline etched across the snow. Part of me believed if I could stand, if I could start walking, I might leave whatever waited on that lake behind forever. But another part knew better. When I finally rose, my legs were numb from more than cold. My body felt hollow, as if some essential part of me had cracked with the ice and been left behind. I turned once, scanning the trees. The lake was hidden by the trunks, the line of pines dense enough to mask everything. But I still felt it, watching, waiting. I forced myself to look away. Step by step, I followed the tire tracks, each footfall deliberate. The cold had grown teeth by then, biting deep into my joints. My satchel thumped against my hip, each impact a small reminder that I'd made it this far. Somewhere behind me, the wind rose. I didn't look back. After an hour, the road widened. A pair of frozen ruts curved toward a squat utility shack, just a weather station, unmanned this time of year. But a small antenna jutted from its roof, bristling with frost. I climbed the 3 icy steps and tried the door. It swung open on cold hinges. Inside, the air was stale, but mercifully still.
A workbench lined one wall, scattered with tools. An old radio unit sat near the window, its display dark. I crossed to it, hands shaking. When I pressed the power toggle, a red light blinked on. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I fumbled the mic free. "This is Survey Technician." My voice cracked. I swallowed, throat raw. "This is Marcus Hall. I need assistance. Coordinate?" I read them in a hoarse whisper. My tongue felt thick. Static swallowed the reply. I tried again, voice rising. "Anyone receiving? Please respond." The radio crackled. "Copy. Technician Hall, confirm your status." Relief struck so hard my knees almost buckled. "I'm alone. I'm alive. I need evacuation." "Understood," the voice replied. Calm, professional. "Remain in place. Extraction team inbound. Approximate arrival, 4 hours." 4 hours. I set the mic down. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sank onto the floor beside the workbench, breath slowing by degrees. The quiet here felt different, flat and ordinary. No tapping, no hidden breath beneath the ice. I closed my eyes, and in that darkness, I saw the 3 lights again, pale, unblinking, arranged in a perfect line across the frozen lake. I opened my eyes. Outside the window, the trees stirred. Snow drifted across the clearing in slow waves. I didn't look for the lights again. The hours crawled by. My thoughts slipped in and out, never settling.
When the first thrum of rotor blades reached me, I didn't believe it was real. Not until the helicopter swung into view, its searchlight sweeping across the snow. I stepped outside, squinting into the glare. A figure climbed down, bundled in orange rescue gear. They raised a hand in cautious greeting. "You Marcus Hall?" the rescuer called. I nodded. My voice wouldn't come. "Come on," they said, beckoning me closer. "Let's get you out of here." My legs moved without permission. Each step felt enormous, like crossing some final threshold. The cabin door shut behind me. The heat from the vents wrapped my frozen skin. I closed my eyes and let it. When the helicopter lifted, I forced myself to keep my gaze on the tree line, on the place where the lake lay hidden. I thought, just for a moment, I saw the ice fracture again. A spider web of white lines radiating from the center. But when I blinked, it was gone. The treetops fell away. I was going home. Whatever waited beneath that frozen surface would stay there. And if part of it had come with me, if some thread still tied me to that place, it didn't matter. I was alive. And sometimes, that's all survival.